We're at the Missouri State Archives, and we're going into the stacks where the records are held for the archives. We hold records from all branches of state government. We have about at least 338 million documents in our holdings here, 500,000 photographs, video and film library, just a tremendous amount of material that researchers are able to use when they're conducting research here at the archives. On these rows here, we are storing the Missouri State Penitentiary and the records of the other agencies and corrections. Your national audience, I'm sure, is familiar with James Earl Ray and his killing of Dr. King, and so that's what we're going to show you in this area today. What I'm going to pull here is the classification book for James Earl Ray. It actually has the marks and scars that he had for identification purposes, and since he escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary, that was important for identifying him once that the national authorities had determined who that they were looking for in the manhunt for the killer of Dr. King. This is actually the criminal identification for James Earl Ray. It gives all the statistics for him. If you see here, it kind of lists like his birth date, where he was born, his mother's name, his address, and then down on the page further, it also talks about what he was actually charged for, why he was in the Missouri State Penitentiary, that kind of information. He'd actually stolen a motor vehicle, and so he was in for auto theft, basically. These all came to us as a transfer from the Missouri State Penitentiary. We have a number of series here. We've pulled some other volumes already that relate to James Earl Ray as well. And we received all of these as transfers from the Missouri State Penitentiary. What we're looking at here is the Inmate Register that contains the information on James Earl Ray. We've marked the page previously. If you look here, his inmate number 00416 shows when he was admitted to the Missouri State Penitentiary in 1960. And it shows all the different information about him. He was a baker as his occupation and Catholic as well. He only went to the 10th grade, which is interesting as well. He did not graduate from high school. And then this column shows where he had been in prison before. So if you look, he'd been in both the state penitentiary in Illinois, as well as serving 2 stints in Leavenworth, Kansas in the U.S. Penitentiary there. He was serving 20 years. I'm sure that some of that had to do with the fact of him being a repeat felon, and it shows how long that he was serving. So he was convicted in February of 1960 and admitted to the state penitentiary on March 17th, 1960. And he was supposed to get out of the state penitentiary in 1980. And if he served good time, which he did not because he escaped, he would have gotten out for good behavior March 16th of 1975. And then these last columns are for discharge and violation of rules, and this is where it shows that at one time he had been admitted to the state hospital in Fulton, and that was in 1966. But then on April the 23rd, 1967, he escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary. Next, we're going to look at the record of escapes for the time period when James Earl Ray left the Missouri State Penitentiary. He escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary. You can kind of look at the book here and look at all the escapes from 1965 through 1967, and he's the next to last entry on the page. He actually smuggled himself out in a bread truck. But it's kind of interesting when you look at all these escapes. They've highlighted those that came from inside the prison itself on this page. And so there are only 5 on this page from June of 65 through May of 67, basically a 2-year period, that escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary. Most of the rest of these were on work release when they escaped. And if you also look at the page too, and how that all were recaptured except for James Earl Ray. He is the only blank entry on this page, and he was not returned to the Missouri State Penitentiary. He went to Alabama and then went to Memphis, where that he killed Dr. King. He escaped to Canada eventually, took on an alias, went to England, and that's where he was captured, is in England. What we're looking at now is the extradition folder of Governor Hearns for James Earl Ray. Because he was actually captured in Great Britain, there was a number of telegrams and correspondence because he still was supposed to be in the custody of the Missouri State Penitentiary at the time. So the extradition was based on his escape from the Missouri State Penitentiary. This document here is the actual request for extradition hearing that was taken in Great Britain. If you look on here too, it says James Earl Ray, but they specifically cite his alias that he assumed when he fled to Canada, and that's what was on his passport when he went to Great Britain as well. The extradition was in June of 1968, and he was brought back soon thereafter to Memphis, Tennessee for prosecution. He eventually pleads guilty, actually, to the assassination. He was incarcerated in Tennessee, eventually at the Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary there in Tennessee, and he eventually died in the Tennessee State Penitentiary. The James Earl Ray documents are really an example of what that you would find for any any family that has a family member in a prison. So in that respect, it's kind of just a general approach. But then for historians who are really interested in all the details, it gives you additional details that you may not have known. I mean, you may not know that he was at the Fulton State Hospital if you were beginning your research. You may not have known, what he was in prison for here. It also gives you a roadmap to other records, like if you remember that register, it gave citations to other arrests that he had had. So it gives you clues to find other information about him. When they were investigating Dr. King's assassination, they came to the Missouri State Penitentiary and went through every record they had for those details. And historians do those same kinds of things.